The Big Ten and the SEC want 4 auto bids each.
You are Locked On College Football, your daily podcast on all things college football. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Locked On College Football. I'm your host, Spencer McLaughlin. Thank you so much for making this your first listen or your first view every day. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day, and your daily source to stay up to date with the biggest stories in the greatest sport on planet Earth, which is in full swing, and it's a glorious, glorious thing. This episode brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. Is Hugh Freeze's seat warming? It's not hot. He's not getting fired, I don't think. But is it warming with an eye towards next year? We'll talk about that today, and takeaways from this past weekend of college football that I didn't get to yesterday that you need to know today, including the Fighting Illini of Illinois. Impressed me in a loss. That's all I'm going to say for now. Tune in later. But tune in now for this take on the Big Ten and SEC. Stop me if you've heard this one before. The Big Ten and SEC don't care about you. They don't care. They do not care. If you are not in the Big Ten or the SEC, they don't care about you. They just don't care. This wonderful sport, this beautiful world of college football that they have helped to create and that they help make great as conferences, as leaders, as schools, universities, all of that stuff, they just don't care. They'll do whatever benefits them and only them, because, who cares what everybody else wants. So there are discussions. This is not a proposal that has been adopted. These are just discussions that are taking place, reported by about, a dozen different people in the national media landscape, that they want a 14-team playoff that has 4 auto bids in the Big Ten, 4 auto bids in the SEC, give 2 auto bids each for the Big 12 and ACC. That gets you to, let me do a quick math, 8 and 4 is 12. And then you'd have the G5 champ and 3 at-large bids, and there's your 16-team playoff. The scheduling alliance that they have proposed, because we want to see more only Big Ten SEC games, which I'm not inherently opposed to, I'll get to that in just a moment, depends on the SEC being willing to adopt a 9-game conference schedule, which they haven't done so far. Because the Big Ten would be saying, well, hey, wait a minute. If we're trying to get at-large teams in or get higher seeds in the playoff, we would like to, see you play the same number of conference games as us, so that we're playing 10 Power 4 opponents, or really Power 2, and you're playing 10 Power 2 opponents. And we'll see if that materializes and if the SEC finally caves in to play 9 conference games, which would probably mean they'd end potentially, not entirely, just me spitballing here, but think about how logical this is. If the Big Ten and SEC are going to be like this, if they're, I don't know if I did that hand gesture right, but those of you on YouTube, you can tell me how I need to do it better. Is it like this? You twist the fingers? I don't know. People younger than me, let me know. If they're going to be intertwined and just do everything together, does the SEC then take their traditional non-conference matchups with the ACC, matchups like Georgia, Georgia Tech, Florida, Florida State, South Carolina, Clemson, do they take those and say, goodbye? We do not want these anymore. It's just another game we could lose that would remove our team from the playoff. I don't know, maybe. I certainly hope not. We've taken away enough history. We've taken away enough tradition in this sport. But the Big Ten and SEC, they just don't care. They want to get all the access to the playoff. They want to have 4 bids each. I don't have a lot of hair on my head. That's by choice. I could if I wanted to, but I prefer to keep it short and go full Sid from Toy Story. Many of you weren't thinking that before. Now you can't unsee it. Some of you have already pointed it out. I see it. I don't necessarily agree with it entirely. I'm just saying that I see it. But the SEC and Big Ten making these sorts of announcements, like 4 auto bids each, which I want to throw up into this microphone, and makes me want to pull out what little hair I choose to keep on top of my head. Because we have torn at the very fabric of what makes this sport great already. Alabama and Georgia just played one of the greatest college football games in recent memory. It was unbelievable. Alabama was the greatest team since 2019 LSU, since the Miami Hurricanes of old that had like 12 first-round draft picks or whatever it was. And then all of a sudden, Georgia had the lead with less than 3 minutes to go. And then a 17-year-old catches a ball, runs down the sideline as a 75-yard touchdown, and sends Bryant-Denny Stadium into a frenzy that I don't even know if I've heard in my lifetime before. And when watching games on TV, I haven't been there in person. I hope to change that one day. I've seen that place get pretty darn loud. That game was incredible. It was amazing. And the impact of it has already been reduced. Does everybody understand that? The 12-team playoff has already cut down the importance of that game. It was wild. It was entertaining. It was fun. Ask yourself this question. What is the best regular season NFL game you've watched in the last few years? What's the best? What's the most impactful one? I don't know. I could give you a dozen college football games. I'll start with Georgia, Alabama. Why don't we go Alabama, Auburn in the Iron Bowl last year? You can just keep going. You think about them. But we're just taking away value from the regular season already with a 12-team playoff, and we want to do it even more with 4 auto bids apiece. Oh, gosh, that's just gross. That's gross. The incentives, scheduling-wise, to play non-conference games against non-Big Ten SEC schools is going to be diminished, I won't say completely, but dramatically if you go to this sort of proposal. You will have 9-3 teams every year that get into the playoff. Right now in the 12-team playoff, at least, a 9-3 team could get in, but it really depends on the schedule, and it's not a lock. You will have 9-3 teams guaranteed. You're just making this the NFL light. That's what you're doing. You are making this NFL light, and I hate it. I hope this proposal gets shot down like the countless bills in Congress that you never see or hear about because they don't make it out of committee. I hope this idea goes down into the earth's mantle and disintegrates and is removed from our collective memory. 4 auto bids each. Ugh. It's bad enough we have auto bids for conference champs. It's bad enough we have any auto bids, anywhere. It's an absurd notion to me. I don't agree with it. You should be rewarded for winning a conference championships. You don't need an automatic bid. You don't need it. If you're winning a conference championship, odds are you're going to be considered one of the top 12 teams in all of college football. And if you are not, that is because your conference is laughably weak, and you should not be rewarded for winning a weak conference the same way teams winning a better conference are. So I think there are all sorts of negative ramifications here. But as usual, I would love to come on here, be optimistic, and say, I don't think it'll happen. I don't know that they'll do this. SEC already came this close to destroying the Big 12. Big 10 already came that close to destroying the Pac-12, essentially did for all intents and purposes. Neither of those things needed to happen to make college football great, but they wanted them to happen. And they've got those schools, and they've got the television contracts, and they've got the money, so they can kind of do whatever they like. And everyone else just has to say, please don't break off and leave us behind. I pray that day never arrives. Let me know your thoughts in the YouTube comments or hit me up on X, formerly known as Twitter. Speaking of the SEC, one of the most disappointing teams in that league right now is Auburn. Is Hugh Freeze on the hot seat? No, but is he on the warming seat? Well, it should at least have a higher temperature than it did before the year. That is coming up next. It's time to highlight my Roy Player of the Week. Roy is a new platform that lets fans make contributions directly to their favorite athletes. Download Roy for iOS or Android and enter referral code LOCKEDON, and you'll automatically be entered into a sweepstakes to win $5,000 cash. No purchase necessary. Void where prohibited. This week was pretty easy. Ryan Williams, the wide receiver at Alabama, is the Roy Player of the Week. I mean, I don't know that what do you how do you describe this guy? Georgia comes storming back, takes the lead, and the next play after Georgia takes the lead for Alabama, Ryan Williams goes 1-on-2 down the sideline and just 75-yard touchdown. I don't know how much better it can get. And you can now support him and all your favorite college athletes with Roy. You have the chance to show your appreciation, and standout performances all throughout the country are worthy of said appreciation. Yeah, you can do that with Roy. Get off the sidelines and into the NIL game with Roy. You can support your favorite athletes directly. Roy, Off the sidelines, into the game, Roy's the way to do it. Is Hugh Freeze's seat getting warmer? It shouldn't be scorching hot, but in my view, it needs to be heating up. That is Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. The Tigers are 2-3 despite not having left the state of Alabama or playing at a stadium that isn't their own so far this year, Zach. Is Hugh Freeze's seat getting hotter? And if not, why not?
No, it's not getting hotter. And there are going to be some parts of Auburn that think, oh my goodness, something's going wrong. We're not immediately competing with Alabama and Georgia. We got to fire the head coach. No way. Hugh Freeze, to me, he's building the program the right way. Now, should Auburn be 2-3 right now? No, they need to be better than 2-3. And he's owned that, to be fair. Like, he has absolutely owned that. But with what he's done as far as acquiring talent through the high school ranks, no, I think you'd be crazy to fire him right now.
No, I don't think that he should have a hot seat. I'm saying it should be warming up. I don't think there's a world, barring like a 3-9 season, which I don't foresee, but I don't know,
3-9's on the table right now. I mean, I think 4-8 is probably the most likely option.
That's
you had
crazy.
to project it out moving. I mean, yeah, but you look at it and it's like, okay, well, like where are the two wins? Auburn hosts Vandy, they host ULM. Like those are the two most likely wins.
Don't sleep on Vanderbilt now.
Sure, especially with their quarterback, and he went in with a
Diego Pavia. Know the name. Diego Pavia. Know the name.
Yeah, he'll be known forever as like the Auburn Slayer if he does it with Vandy after doing it with New Mexico State a year ago. But Auburn, like we're going to talk about it in a second, but like they go to Georgia, yikes. Bye week, they go to Missouri, yikes. They go to Kentucky, maybe. I'm not buying it, but maybe. Then they return home. They host Vandy. They host ULM. They host Texas A&M, and then they go to Tuscaloosa for the Iron Bowl. Like, there's not 2 guaranteed wins on that schedule, unless you count Vandy, and some people will, and some people will kind of be a little more, cautious, like you just were. And I'm in that boat too right now. Like, the only guaranteed win on the schedule right now is ULM. But the frustrating thing about this, Spencer, is like, I don't think Auburn is this awful team. I just don't think they know how to win a football game. And unfortunately for Auburn.
Now, in the measuring of how good a football team is, does winning the game matter?
100%.
Okay, just checking.
But sure, and you can twist what I'm saying all you want. I don't care. But the fact of the matter is, like, Auburn and what they've done from a production standpoint this year, it does scream like, okay, this team has the ingredients to upset someone this year. Now, does Auburn want to be in that situation? No, they want to kind of be a team that's competing. And we all thought they could be 7-5 or 8-4 going into the season. But this is a team that, everybody talked about how great Oklahoma's defense was, and it's not a bad defense. They put up 480 yards. They just couldn't score. They couldn't score on the goal line. They missed field goals. And then, obviously the pick 6 at the end of the game by Peyton Thorne. But this isn't a team that is incapable of anything. Their defense has done remarkably well, considering how often their offense has turned the football over. And Auburn leads the country, at least going into last week, and they were pretty effective this week against Oklahoma, like in chunk plays. They're one of the best teams in all of college football in chunk plays and generating these big pieces of yardage. They can't stop turning the football over. And yeah, that is super, super important.
Yeah, they remind me of your favorite coach for me to discuss here on Locked On College Football, Jed Fish up at Washington, who somehow, by the way, are favored against Michigan this week. I know they're at home, but it's the same sort of reasoning is what the sportsbook are seeing, Zach, in that they can move the ball, they can do things on offense, they've got playmakers, and then they just get down and they're the cartoon manifestation of stepping on a rake and whacking yourself in the forehead over and over and over again. If you clean that up, it can improve. I think Freeze's seat has to be warming as you go towards 2025. I want to make myself clear. Barring a 2-10, maybe 3-9 season, which I don't think is likely. I think they get to 4 or 5 wins.
Even then, Spencer, and I want to push back because I'm sure, you and I talk all the time. Like, I'm sure you've made fun of me for pulling for a team and covering a team that's paying 3 coaches' salaries right now. And all of these folks outside of Auburn, what?
Well,
What?
what I was about to say is I don't do that enough, quite frankly.
Right. But I mean, there's a lot of people saying like, "Oh, Hugh Freeze better get hot, or they're going to run him out of Auburn." It's like the same people that are saying like, "Oh, they should start kind of pushing Hugh Freeze out the door," are the same people that make fun of Auburn for not giving a coach an actual shot. So, like to me, I think there's a little bit of a double standard sometimes when people talk about this situation at Auburn.
I think the buyout consideration is a substantial one. The same argument was made with Jimbo Fisher at Texas A&M. They won't pay him this amount just to go away. Well, then they did.
Little different.
Yeah. There's a difference. I'm just saying there's a line, and Hugh Freeze needs to do a little bit more to move himself away from that, or else the narrative will be going into 2025. Hey, you have to win 8-9 football games, or we're just not going to believe that you're capable of doing this.
Yeah, Hugh Freeze said that his tenure would be defined by the 2024 and 2025 recruiting classes. And he's like, if they don't execute and they don't come to fruition, it's like, I'm toast. Like, I'm not going to last here. And I think he's right. I think he's right in that. And you look at the collection of freshmen of the 2024 class that's playing football right now. I mean, it's exceptional. Caleb Harris, Malik Blockton, DeMarcus Riddick, true freshman, led Auburn in tackles against Oklahoma. I mean, and then obviously Cam Coleman is going to be a big part of the offense moving forward, as well as so is Malcolm Simmons, who's the guy who's not really being talked about. And so like they've got the collection of talent. The talent's just 18 years old. And I think there's also a little bit of a culture issue where these young guys want to come in and compete. And these older guys on the team, it's like, they're kind of used to this. They're kind of used to being around a 500 team. And you just kind of wonder what that looks like in the locker room sometimes.
Yeah, and with a quarterback like Peyton Thorne, who's so inexperienced in college football, as he grows with this young roster, I'm sure he will mature into a player that, is very different than what he has right now. That is intense, heavy sarcasm for everybody out there. I'm well aware of how old Peyton Thorne is. But I want to switch gears in the SEC here. Big game this week in College Station. Texas A&M, number 25 in the country, hosting number 9 Missouri. According to our friends at FanDuel, Zach, did you know that they're America's number 1 sports book? I just thought I'd toss that out there for everybody.
Do other sports books exist, Spencer? I'm unaware.
I don't know of any. I just know that FanDuel's number 1, and that's all that we really care about. But Texas A&M's -1.5 against Missouri. I'm intrigued by the Aggies here, Zach, because Missouri has shown cracks, and Texas A&M, as I predicted week 1, lost to Notre Dame. They haven't lost since. They have looked better. Now, they have had some back and forth at quarterback because of the injury to Connor Wegman, but Marcel Reed against Arkansas, that's not a bad Arkansas team. They're not great, but it's not a bad team. Texas A&M got it done in the neutral site. What's your kind of snapshot of this football game?
Yeah, to me, I think this is all Missouri. I think Missouri has played down to the level of competition so far this year. And look, this is a Missouri team whose offense hasn't lived up to the hype, both externally and internally. Eli Drinkwitz, the head coach, he was on our other college football show, College Football Smothered and Covered with Barrett Sallee last week. And he's like, look, I've been disappointed with the offense. I think there's an opportunity here for Mizzou to make a statement, or at least the opportunity is there. We'll see if they seize it or not, but they want to be respected. Missouri doesn't feel like they're respected, even with what they did a year ago, and they're about to be in a great spot to stack 2 seasons back to back and potentially make a run for the playoff. You got to win. You got to win these types of games. They were able to do it a year ago. Can you do it on Saturday? Spencer, I think they do.
I think it's a really exciting game because it's a prove-it moment for Missouri, like you said. But if Texas A&M wins, you're going to have the whole anti-Texas A&M contingent come out of the woods and say, oh my gosh, are these guys really that we're overrating and Missouri was overrated? Like the Texas A&M or the anti-Texas A&M crowd is suddenly going to convince you that Missouri is the worst college football team on the planet because they went to overtime with Vanderbilt, who's respectable, though not great. And if Texas A&M wins, suddenly they're looking up and you're like, that's a one-loss team that's ranked in the top 25 with a loss to Notre Dame. And then you look at that last regular season matchup of the year against Texas and you're like, I don't know, maybe.
Is it fair to say the anti-Texas A&M crowd is just anybody who's not a Texas A&M fan? Is that fair to say?
If you're just talking about the population of Austin, Texas, yes, that is a fair thing to say. Zac Blackerby, Locked On Auburn. Always enjoy it, my man.
Love you long time.
Under the radar games from this past week that I didn't get to yesterday. You have to stick around because there are too many to get to. Illinois.
Tulane? What? No, not Tulane. We're not there yet.
Tulane, no, we're not. Tulane? No, we're not on Tulane yet. We're not there
Playoff
just
team,
yet.
Tulane.
We are, however, looking at Illinois because Bret Bielema. You should pay attention to Bret Bielema. That's coming up next. First, let's talk about FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, guess what? You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. The season's well underway. As I'm sure you're aware, FanDuel's the place to go. That's America's #1 sportsbook. Not 2, not 3, not 4, which is the number of years the Heatles were together. They are #1. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed, when you place your first $5 bet. Do you want to bet college football? Do you listen to my takes on this particular program and score predictions and say, that's absurd, that's ridiculous, what are you talking about? And you want to make some money off it? FanDuel's the way to do it. Everything you want for college football, all the games, all the lines, all the over-unders, it's all over there. Sometimes I'm sharp, sometimes I'm not. It's up to you to decide when those instances are going to arrive. FanDuel.com, that's the place to go to get America's #1 sportsbook, FanDuel.com. Are you aware of what Illinois is as a football team this year? They're a good one. I don't know that they're a great one. I know that they're a good one. So I was thinking about the Illini, who lost 21-7 against Penn State on the road. I think Penn State's a really good football team. I think Michigan should be grateful they don't play Penn State this year, or that's a game I'd pick Michigan to lose. But then I think about it, and I say, well, could they lose to Illinois? Is this possible? Is it feasible? What Illinois did, this is what I call a quality loss. Or for my OG listeners from way back in the day, on the Monday morning win-loss meter on a 5-point scale, this would be a lean win feeling for Illinois. You went to Penn State, you lose 21-7. I thought Illinois would cover. Doesn't mean I'm not impressed by the fact that they did. I think Illinois is a good football team. And if you're a Michigan fan, looking at the schedule, I will get to Michigan more in just a moment because I wasn't particularly concerned after the Minnesota game, which, again, I'll get to that in just a sec. As you look at the Wolverines' schedule, there are games that get highlighted, like this week. They're an underdog against Washington. Oh, Vegas is just messing with my head with that one. Then they have a bye. The game's in Seattle, by the way. Then they have a bye, and then they are at Illinois. They are at Illinois. So remember, Illinois played a competitive football game with Penn State on the road. Do you think that Penn State is capable of beating Michigan? If you do, you might want to think about the possibility of Illinois. I don't know that I'm there yet. I'm just saying that Penn State game showed me plenty. No, their offense wasn't great. Guess what? Penn State has got a capable defense. I think Tom Allen's starting to round things into form on that side of the football after a couple of bumpy moments, but overall, Penn State's been a good team. Yeah, the Bowling Green game was bad, but they haven't lost yet. Drew Eiler looks pretty good. Their coordinator hires, I think, are working out. That Penn State defense, or the Illinois defense, well, I know the Penn State defense is good, but the Illinois defense is pretty capable. It's pretty capable. Is Michigan going to blow the doors off you? Or is that going to be a slugfest sort of game? I just keep your eye on Bret Bielema and the Illini. October 19th in Champaign. That's not at the big house. That's on the road. Michigan's coming off a bye. Have to like that if you're the Wolverines, but I'm just saying. Just watch out for the Illini. Very curious to see what the point spread will be on that game when the time arrives. Speaking of Michigan, 27-24, they beat Minnesota. There was the whole onside kick deal, and there was this, and there was that, and Michigan was a better team. I was surprised the line was under 10. It eventually jumped over 10 to 10.5, which is where I felt it should have been, in the 10.5, 11 range. Minnesota ends up covering that number. Good for the Golden Gophers, I guess. I really don't know what the future of Minnesota Golden Gophers football is with PJ Fleck at the helm. I mean, they got to a bowl game last year at 5-7. They won it. It kind of feels like they're all destined for a 5-6 win season again this year. But this is one of those games that Michigan got up big, and then all of a sudden Minnesota finds a second wind. I think a couple things can happen when a team that is better than the other team, which Michigan clearly is, gets a big lead. A couple things can happen that allow for this sorts of nervy situation. Number one, Michigan does not have, this maybe is number one, this is number three. This is just the first thing I'll go to. But number one, Michigan doesn't have the sort of offense that is going to pull away. You'll always be able to hang around statistically in that you're not trailing by 30 to 40 points. This Michigan offense isn't going to do that. Number two, you can get a little complacent and know, yeah, we're better than these guys. Yeah, this game is kind of over. And I don't think that was a big thing. And it was more about the third thing. Like, when you get up big as defensive coordinator, if you Wink Martindale, are you going to be as aggressive? Are you going? No, you're going to not allow the big play. So Michigan wins this game. It's a lot closer than the final score indicated. That was my big takeaway was, hey, Michigan was a significantly better team. I don't think less of the Wolverines, who right now I think go into Seattle and win the football game. Crazy line shift, by the way, which I'll get back to in just a moment. I think they go into Seattle and win the football game. I don't view Michigan differently because Minnesota staged a comeback and almost won the football game. I was always pretty confident that Michigan was going to win. But before the season, Michigan was an 8.5 point. Actually, they opened at 11.5, which I thought was too many. They opened as an 11.5 point favorite at Washington. And that line, according to our friends at FanDuel, is now to Washington minus 2.5 is pretty crazy. The last time there was that big of a movement in a line, let me see if I can think of one. Where have I seen that before? Oh, that's right. Michigan was minus 8.5 against USC, plus 4.5 by kickoff, plus 5.5 at some books, and what do you know? Michigan wins the game outright. I think they probably do that again here. That's not my official prediction. That's just kind of my sense on the Wolverines, who I think are finding themselves as the season has gone on. If they played Texas again today, they'd lose the football game no matter where it was played. It'd be more competitive, is all I would say. Clemson 40, Stanford 14. Now, Ashton Daniels got hurt in this one. Turns out it wasn't going to matter. Clemson is a good football team. They are not on the same level as Georgia. We saw that in week one. Can teams improve? Yes, they absolutely can. The last time Georgia beat a team like that in week one in Atlanta in a quote-unquote neutral site game was Oregon in 2022, who went on to be a 9-3 team. I think Clemson's better than that Oregon team. I don't know that Clemson is elevating themselves. Like, don't get sucked into Clemson is having great offensive games and they're playing, non-SEC opponents, and therefore Clemson is much, much better than what they were in the first week. Georgia and Clemson play. I'm still picking Georgia to win by double digits, and they probably do. But Clemson, to their credit, in the 3 games since that Georgia outburst by the Bulldogs, of course, they've put up 66, 59, and 40 points. So Garrett Riley and Cade Klubnik are in a much better rhythm than what they were a season ago. And as I talked about on yesterday's show, 2-horse race in the ACC. I don't buy Louisville yet. I don't know who else there is to buy. Duke? Am I supposed to buy Duke? They're an underdog this week against Georgia Tech. For a reason. Georgia Tech might be a better football team, even though Duke has the better record. So I think Clemson is improving. I'm not going to get sucked into, well, they could go on, win the national championship. Like, no. If you lost 34-3 against Georgia, you're not in that sort of class. So I'm not completely flipping the script on Clemson. I'm just giving them credit to where they have established themselves very clearly in my mind as the number 2 team in the ACC, and it might be 1A, 1B. It might be 1A, 1B with the Hurricanes and the Tigers. Last game that I didn't get to on yesterday's show, but wanted to today. Indiana, 42-28 over Maryland. Speaking of games that Michigan has to go on the road to play, Curt Cignetti has the boys in Bloomington 5-0 for the first time literally in my entire life. Literally in my entire life. I believe the year was 1970. I don't know. One of those presidents that I read about in history class that has not been amongst the living presidents for quite some time. 5-0, number 23 in all the land. That's just impressive. That's all it is. It's impressive. This is a quick turnaround. This is way quicker than anyone expected. I don't know if they're the same team as Illinois, because have they played a great team yet? No. Does that mean they're not a good football team? Also no. You can say, hey, they're a good football team. I just don't know if they're great yet. That's kind of how I feel with Illinois, but I'm more impressed with the Illini who have a loss because they went to Penn State and, quite frankly, played a pretty darn good football game. Not perfect, but played well defensively. Offense couldn't quite get going. Tough environment against a really, really good college football playoff caliber team in Penn State. But watch for Indiana, 42-28 over Maryland. Curtis Rourke playing some darn good football. Darn good football. Curt Cignetti is texting the students on campus saying, hey, come to the game. We're going to do X, Y, and Z. Well, I imagine he'll send out another text regardless of what their record is by the time the Michigan game rolls around. By the way, Indiana has about a 38% chance, according to ESPN, to make the college football playoff and one of the most favorable schedules in all of the Power Four. Rutgers is 4-0. They go to Nebraska this week, who's 4-1, got a bounce-back win. I just want you to be aware of that football game. That's all. Just keep that one on your radar. One of my favorite bets before the season was Nebraska over 7.5. Still feeling pretty good about that. Appreciate everyone listening. I will see you next time. And until then, hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.